Separation anxiety is a very real phobia for many companion dogs. Being alone is downright terrifying. And that makes living with them very stressful for pet parents, too. If you're one of those people, you know just daily activities can be really difficult. So is there any hope? Well, that is a great question. Joining me today is my own coach, teacher, and mentor when it comes to helping others find hope. Dr. Moira Hechenleitner is a veterinarian and a certified separation anxiety trainer with postgraduate in animal-assisted therapy. She's a founding board member of the Chilean Association of Professional Dog Trainers. Moira speaks internationally, so I'm just thrilled that she had a few minutes to spend with me. And I'm hoping that this discussion will be really enlightening and helpful for you too. Hi, Moira. It's so good to be with you today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I loved when I got your email. It was just, I'm going to be able to see that. It's been a long time.
It has been. For those who don't know, which is everybody here, the way that I got to know Moira is I participated in a shadowing program that you offer, and it was so hugely helpful for me, and especially with a case that we can mention later on in the interview, but it was a severe case of separation anxiety that turned out very successful, and I so credit you for helping with that. It was just awesome. So I think you're awesome in everything that you do, and I'm so excited that we get to share some of your knowledge with the world today. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I mean, it wasn't only, it was you. I just the messenger, and I just provided tools, and it was all you. And I did enjoy that shadowing program quite a lot. I think it's one of my favorite programs, within all the different variety of courses and programs I have in my library or in my platform, because it's so real, right? And it really touches on what's really going on with a case and how to handle each part of the way. So I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the group that we created in there with all the attendees. So I was a little bit sad when we finished. That's why I'm so happy to be able to be here with you today.
Let's dive in. Okay, so the whole topic of my podcast is lives touched by pets. So we have to start with you telling us about a pet that has touched your life.
There's so many, and I remember you mentioning this ahead of time, and I was like, I already know who to choose, and I really don't. So I'm sorry if I rumble a little bit, but I think that every pet I have had has been part of a different stage of my life. And it has been perfect because they have taught me so much about that stage I'm living. And I would say that these two, so my current dog and my cat, you can see there in the screen, I think they have touched me as an adult quite a lot because they have taught me patience. Not because they do something wrong in any way, but because of how they behave and how they face life. They have allowed me to observe how patient they are, how accepting of their circumstances, their life circumstances, how they don't really dwell much with whatever is going wrong or not going perfect. And they just stay present, and they're grateful for whatever it is that happens in the day to day. And I think that is such a huge lesson that I have been absorbing or learning in my 40s that I guess I would have to choose them.
I think that's the most beautiful gift that pets give us in life. And we give it back to them too. Right. So there's a reason why everybody who has a pet is so touched. Through the hard times and the good times, they add such just a different quality to our lives. So
yeah, not hard sometimes to keep up with everything that they give us. I believe, I think it's a big, daily job of really working on giving that back to them, because we are so busy and our lives nowadays are so busy that we go we don't stop, we go on and on and on, and we forget to take a breather and observe them and mirror their behavior a little bit more. So I think that it's a nice reminder to have on an everyday basis that we can slow down, that we can enjoy the present moment, and that they deserve us to pay attention to them a little bit too, and not only just try to be efficient, every second of every day.
And even when they've got some sort of, whether it's a mental health issue or a behavioral issue, it's so important to take a breath and to look at the good things and the good things that you bring to each other's lives. And that's so important. Separation anxiety is definitely one of those that we hear a lot from different people talking about that. And so this is such an important topic, I think, that's going to benefit so many people. What is separation anxiety or separation distress exactly?
In easy words, separation anxiety is being afraid of being left alone. But this is not a regular fear. It's something that we could call an irrational fear. What does that mean? What does irrational fear mean? It's basically a phobia. And why do we call it like that and not just a regular fear? Because once the dog has been exposed to being left alone and has been able to confirm that their life isn't in danger, they aren't able to stop creating or having a response that means that they are threatened by it. So in other words, what happens is that every time they're exposed to it, no matter that they have confirmed that this is not a life-threatening situation, they still panic. They still elicit or display a stress response when they're facing the situation. So what happens is that over time, when they're exposed to this, they escalate in terms of the symptoms or the signs or the behaviors that they are displaying. And they are not going to likely adapt to the situation, even if you expose them to them on a daily basis, because they don't know how to use those coping mechanisms that a dog without separation anxiety would be able to use.
Is there a difference between separation anxiety or distress and confinement distress?
First, I think it's important to sort of go through the different terminology, right? Because there's a lot of talk about separation distress and separation anxiety. To me, those two are the same. I wouldn't really separate them. They both mean that the dog, for them, that being left alone is an aversive stimulus. So they can't handle it. It's completely, it's a punishment basically for them to be left alone. And on the other hand, we have separation-related behaviors. Separation-related behaviors are behaviors that the dog displays when they're left alone, but they can have multiple different causes or root causes or underlying motivations, because a dog could bark because he saw someone passing by, or a dog could destroy things in the house because they have been left alone for a long time and they're very bored, or they're puppies and they don't really know what is a toy and what is they shouldn't be eating, or we don't like them to eat, right? And they could also be suffering from separation anxiety or separation distress, which I would consider the same thing. And they're actually panicking because they are left alone. So the situation is aversive to them. That's on one hand. I just wanted to clarify, because I feel like there's so many terminology that we use and we haven't really come to an agreement as a field to really label all of these things in a unified way. And so it tends to become very confusing for a dog guardian when they are trying to find out how to help their dogs. Having said all of that, there is another underlying motivation to display all of these behaviors when left alone, which is confinement issues or confinement distress. And confinement distress is basically very similar to the definition I gave about separation anxiety, but in this case, it's not necessarily about being left alone, it's about being confined. So for that particular dog, what's aversive is actually being confined. Now, when you add to that another stressor, such as, for example, being left alone, the dog tends to react even more because the situation becomes even more uncomfortable. You're adding fuel to this big tank or, jar of fuel until the situation explodes. The difference, though, is that if a dog only suffers from confinement issues and not separation anxiety, if you leave that dog alone in a house with full range of the house, so without confining the dog will likely not react at all. And I think they do at the beginning, the first few times you're exposing him to that situation because they don't really know or they have never experienced it, they react a few minutes, slightly, but you will start seeing a curve that basically starts dying down. So the intensity of those signs starts decreasing, the frequency of the signs starts spreading, and they eventually are able to settle down fully and completely, which a separation anxiety dog wouldn't be able to do. Having said all of this, it is important to keep in mind that there's a high correlation between confinement issues and separation anxiety. So you can see both. And that's when the situation gets a little bit trickier. And actually, most separation anxiety dogs will also suffer from confinement issues. So what does this look like? When you do an alone time assessment, which means that you're going to leave the dog alone and you're going to record or you're going to watch online to see the dog's behavior and body language and signs and symptoms, what you're going to see is that if the dog is free in the house, the signs or the behaviors look a little bit less intense than if you were leaving the dog confined. So you can do 2 assessments and you're going to see the difference in intensity. And in general, we tend to treat, when we implement our training program, we tend to do it with a dog free in the house to avoid that extra challenge of also having the dog in a situation or in a position that is not setting him up for success. But it is important to rule this out because many cases come to me thinking that it's separation anxiety. And when you test the difference and you assess the dog free in the house, you realize that it wasn't separation anxiety at all and it was confinement issues.
So what you're saying, separation anxiety is a true panic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It see it a lot in situations such as, for example, for the pandemic. After the pandemic was we were slowly starting to come back to normal, all of the people who had adopted dogs during the pandemic, or they hadn't let their old dogs alone for quite a while, what happened was that when they started meeting them again, they would see reactions. And reactions that actually looked like the dog wasn't having a good time. So it wasn't that the dog was bored just playing around. You could see that the body language was suggesting distress. The difference, though, in many of those cases, is that if you looked at the big picture, you would see that after a few minutes or over time, so from one day to another, the dog will start actually relaxing progressively, more and more and more, rather than maintaining the intensity day after day or increasing the intensity of the reaction. That means that those dogs were actually not adapted to be left alone, but they didn't have separation anxiety because they were able to understand that this wasn't a life-threatening situation once they were exposed to it once. And once they figured that out, they were, okay, you know what, I guess maybe this wasn't super fun the first time, but I guess I'm all right. I'm not going to die. Cool. I'm just going to relax. A separation anxiety dog, of course, we saw a lot of those as well during the pandemic and after, wouldn't be able to do that. Every time they're left alone, it would be like the first ever experience, right? Where they don't know if this situation is going to kill them or not. And so they continue to replicate the same response over and over.
So that brings me to another point, is that are there certain traits of dogs that are more prone to separation anxiety than others? And is it something that people can cause by not leaving their dog alone?
The truth is that we haven't found a specific trait or a common trait that could lead us to think that this type of dogs will probably have separation anxiety. There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of comments. Usually I get a lot of that from guardians who come to me and they said, yeah, I know that I adopted this breed of dog and I knew that, most of them have separation anxiety. That's not necessarily true. Any dog can have. Sometimes you get like flows of a certain breed and a lot of cases of the same one, and you start wondering, and then you get like a completely different breed for a long time. And sometimes you talk to your colleagues and you realize that, it's just like certain different groups of dogs that come to you and they have a completely different type of dog, like caseload that they're working with different types of dogs. So unfortunately, no. Basically, we think that this has a genetic predisposition and that paired with environmental factors, specific environmental factors, they could trigger the onset of separation anxiety. And those environmental factors are usually in the line of change. So anything that could be traumatizing to the dog, or it could be something that really sort of, it takes them out of balance, could trigger this onset if they already had the genetic predisposition for separation anxiety. That's our belief at this point. And that means it doesn't really matter what the guardian does. If the dog doesn't have that predisposition, it's not going to happen. So there is nothing that a guardian can do that will cause separation anxiety. And that is something very important to consider and to communicate to dog guardians, because most of them come to us feeling very guilty and feeling like they're doing something wrong, either in their day-to-day routines or rituals, or that they did something wrong in the past that if they hadn't done, the dog would be okay. And that isn't correct or isn't accurate. It could have happened anyway. Of course, you can do certain things to maybe increase the likelihood of success, but that doesn't mean that you have any guarantees that this is not going to happen at some point in the dog's life. So that really releases the stress and the guilt that many guardians have surrounding this.
Wow. So let me pause there, because that is such an important point, that people feel so guilty about their dog that has separation anxiety. But the reality is they didn't cause the separation anxiety. That's huge weight off of people's shoulders to think about that.
I just have seen so many people wondering what they did wrong to come to realize that no matter what they would have done, things would have happened anyway. Many cases that I have seen, the dog already had separation anxiety before the dog was adopted, or before, or even if it's the dog comes from a breeder, from the breeding, from that place, they already had separation anxiety. And so, or even maybe just the transition from one household to the other maybe cause or trigger this separation anxiety. But that's not something that they could have prevented or changed in any way. So it's the point, the focus shouldn't be on what did I do to cause it. The focus should be on what can I do to help. Because that's the only thing that's going to take you out of this situation, rather than dwelling on what could I have done different, because you can't change that anyway.
Absolutely. Focus on what you can do about it now and helping with quality of life in the future too. That's huge. And we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. What about we were just talking about when you bring home an animal from a rescue, or let's say you bring home a puppy and the puppy's showing distress. How can people then help to acclimate to alone time before it becomes a major issue?
The first step would be to make sure if this has already become a major issue or not. Because if it is separation anxiety, it's not going to get better over time. So it's very important to differentiate what are we talking about and what is happening. That will give you a better understanding on how you can help your dog. So my first step would be to run a very short alone time assessment when you get your dog. Now, it is important to consider that when you just got your dog, I wouldn't leave the dog alone the next day. I would make sure that I'm a responsible guardian and I take vacation and take a few days off so I can really give the dog the time to settle and to understand that this is their house. Because if you think about it, dogs don't know how to speak human. And no matter how much love I want to give this dog, and no matter how many good intentions I have, and that I actually want this dog forever, and I will never let the dog down and all of those things, the the dog doesn't know. And so imagine if you didn't speak human and someone grabs you from one place, takes you to another, puts you in a room, and brings you food and closes the door. You would think that you have been kidnapped, right? Or that, oh no, you don't know what's going to happen to you, what they're going to do every time they open the door. Are they going to talk to you? Are they going to hurt you? You just don't know, right? Only time will tell, and only good memories that you start collecting from the situation will allow you to feel safe. So the first and most important thing is to provide predictability and a foundation so the dog can feel safe and comfortable in this new place. Once that has happened, so let's say that takes a week, let's say a few days, and the dog feels more comfortable in his own skin in that place, then I would run a short alone time assessment. Whether that is recording, you can leave your phone recording facing the door or wherever you say your dog is going to be, or you can have, surveillance cameras or Zoom, 2 devices connected and bring one with you, and leave the property. Not stand outside, just leave the property, drive away or walk away for 15 minutes and analyze what you see. If you see that your dog reacts in any way but settles quickly or doesn't react at all, you're in the right track, right? And that will mean that you will face the situation a little bit different. So if you saw that things looked okay, how do you plan ahead after that first assessment? The second step would be to start doing absences gradually. So I will continue monitoring because I think it's very important. It allows you not to really imagine what is happening, but actually knowing. There's objective information here that you can analyze and start monitoring your dog. Surveillance cameras are pretty cheap nowadays, and observe what happens in the day-to-day and the progression of this behavior when you're leaving your dog alone. And if everything is going well, you will start increasing those times to fit your needs, and your final duration goal. That would be my first advice in regards to dogs who don't suffer from separation anxiety and are adapting to a new home. And the second big advice would be to make sure you are first providing pretty predictable foundation in general, so your dog knows what to expect of life, because that really creates comfort. It allows you to heal, to relax, to trust, to feel safe. And once they have that foundation, it would be ideal if you start sprinkling more flexibility in the dog's life. So sometimes we don't eat at this time. Sometimes we go out to a place we hadn't been before. Sometimes we go on a road trip. Sometimes we do this, but sprinkles within this realm of predictability, because that will allow the dog to grow. It will push the dog to the edge of their discomfort, and it will help to avoid any changes to become traumatizing in the future. Because a dog will live hopefully 15 years, 20 years, 13 years, and there are going to be changes in that dog's life during that time. And what you want is for none of those changes to be so traumatizing that if the dog had the predisposition to suffer from separation anxiety, for them to trigger it. If the dog finds changes cool, the likelihood is that nothing is going to touch him to a point to trigger all of these bad events that we want to avoid.
And I could see with puppies, we use confinement for management a lot with puppies. And so that can also come into play with this.
Most definitely. And that adds to the layer of difficulties, right? So you have sometimes a separation anxiety dog, and that is in itself, of course, challenging. But then you have a dog who's also doesn't get along with other dogs. And you have a puppy who still hasn't learned where to eliminate. And then so all of those things will add up to how difficult the situation is to approach, navigate, and also to the prognosis. Not because the treatment will be necessarily, or the dog will make less progress in the training in itself, but because all of these other layers are making it harder to manage, to continue with the training, and so on. So the puppy part is one of them for sure. What I try to do is first to determine if the dog is okay being confined or not, right? And that's easy. You can do it with the same style of assessment. If the dog doesn't have separation anxiety but has confinement issues, I would try to two things. One, to create a confinement place that is as big as possible, because the bigger it is, the less confined the dog is going to feel. And at the same time, to really focus all your energy on helping that dog or teaching the dog to be reliable. And I say quote unquote, because what is reliable? But reliable in the sense that you can leave that dog safely alone without confinement, and the dog is going to be okay, safe, and it's not going to do something. So rather than focusing on teaching the dog to be confined, and using all your energy on that, why don't you just focus your energy and teaching your dog to be okay free in the house? It will take you 3 weeks. And after that, you can leave your dog free in the house. You can close certain doors, right? And you can have like certain safe, proof, certain places. But you won't have to be dwelling on, my dog doesn't like the crate. It's okay, like don't use the crate. Focus on the other aspect. If the dog has separation anxiety, the cool thing about the training we do is that we separate the training in such little pieces, and you're watching all the time, and we're suspending other types of absences, that it's like a win-win, because you're leaving the dog alone for 3 seconds. So being free is not really dangerous because you're watching and it's 3 seconds. And over time, those 3 seconds become 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, and the dog learns by consequence to actually be relaxed during that time. And then you have your house-trained dog and, all of the other things that you were worrying about and were leading to confine the dog.
So finding the largest type of confinement space possible and teaching just to be okay. One thing I did when I brought my puppy home, and I didn't realize, he is now on anti-anxiety meds, but he had a lot of anxiety in the crate. And early on, like from that very first weekend, I was really committed to teaching him that is the safest place. It's so safe in there. Yeah, I would have him up and we'd do fun things and activities. And when I knew he was tired, I just, I made it very comfortable for him and sat with him, and just, there was no pressure. He just was learning that this just feels really, really nice. And he had complete freedom to come out if he wanted to. And I just made arrangements. I was not going to leave him in the crate until we got through that whole process. And it went so well that, it would very quickly, he was sleeping through the night. He could sleep in the living room. I remember that day when I had the camera on him that I actually walked out the house going, yay, I did it. But I just really made a commitment that I was really going to work on that, and I was not going to put any pressure on him at all. It was just about teaching him, this is as comfortable as a bed over on the other side of the room. And so he just came to love it. And to this day, he still loves being in his crate.
You mentioned something that I think is key, which is you progress based on his speed. And you made a promise that I'm not going to add more. I'm not going to leave you alone here until you are not comfortable in this place with me by your side. And I think that's when things tend to go wrong, that we skip that part. Like, I need to leave my dog alone. I don't want my dog to destroy my house. I'm going to put the dog in the crate, and the dog hasn't really learned to be on a crate. So you're adding two big things for the dog. Like, you're exposing the dog to those two huge monsters. And yeah, the likelihood is that something is going to go wrong. And I think that understanding that and also promoting that so guardians understand that it's okay and they don't feel guilty about being permissive or too soft with their dogs. And I'm saying all of this quote unquote because I believe those things are a thing, right? It is very important. I'm just going to give you one little example of something that happened to me last few days, which is I have seen this happening so many times where people come to me and they're so overwhelmed because there's so much going on and they feel so guilty that they actually don't want to leave their dog alone because they don't want their dog to suffer. But they have read, they have heard that they should be doing all of these things. So they feel so guilty. They're pushing it in so many levels that they're completely drowning and overwhelmed. And once you give them the peace of mind, the permission, and you tell them you don't have to leave your dog alone. I mean, I don't want you to do it. Like, please don't. It's fine. Your intuition was correct, was on point. Let's start one thing at a time. And it's okay to support your dog, to empathize with him, to give your dog love. It's not bad. You're not hurting your dog. You shouldn't be harder and harsher and tougher. All these things that your gut tells you are correct. The relaxation that gives, it's so big that you start seeing changes happening right away without making any other adjustments, because the person relaxes and they understand that it's fine and they can take the time they need to help their dogs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's just feeling that sense of relief that, oh, okay, I can do that.
Yes.
It does a lot. And the humans are stressed too sometimes, a lot of times, when our dogs are in distress, we are too. It's not easy on either one of us.
And there's so much conflict because we are in distress. We don't want to see them suffer, but we have been told that it's like even like the dog almost was doing it on purpose to us,
Right.
So I've been told that we should be tougher because this is somehow arranged or, like prepared, like the dog was really conspiring to do this. And on the other hand, we feel like we need to support it because this is horrible, this is terrible. We don't want to see them suffer. And so it's like feeding the good wolf and the bad wolf. Which one are you going to feed, right? And as trainers, helping with that and providing that information and that peace of mind that they're on the right track, thinking that they should actually support them and caring for them and that they're not doing it on purpose. It's a big game changer.
Well, this has been just so insightful today, and I hope you've shared so much information that's going to be helpful for people. Let's dig even deeper, and let's do a part 2 about how to actually treat separation anxiety, because it is treatable, right? Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. So please come back for our part 2, and we're going to delve into that subject. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to my podcast. Come back often and tell your friends. If I can be of any help to you and your pet, please reach out to me via my website, www.somuchpotential.com. And for a lot more information, fun, and videos, please follow me, So Much Potential, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. See you soon.